resist, we'll persist, and we won't back down. We are love, we are whole, and we won't back down.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this evening of collective reflection, learning, and continued organizing. I'm Jeremy Burton, the CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Boston, JCRC. We are the voice of our organized Jewish community in civic spaces, and we are made up of diverse member organizations and community representatives. JCRC's work brings our community together on issues of broad Jewish consensus and shared values in order to impact the common good. We are proud that the organized Jewish community has been unequivocal in our support for abortion access, being clear that abortion is healthcare and that abortion access is about the free exercise of our constitutional rights, including our religious freedom. We are fortunate for the deep partnership among Jewish communal organizations doing this work at the municipal, state, and federal level. We know that when we organize collectively, we expand our impact. So thank you to our partners who have made this collective work and this evening's event possible. ADL New England, Hadassah Northeast, the Jewish Alliance for Law and Social Action, CHALSA, the Massachusetts Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, and the National Council of Jewish Women, Massachusetts. There is much work to be done over a long period of time, and together, we are stronger in the doing of it. It is my privilege to introduce Rabbi Liz P.G. Hirsch. Rabbi Hirsch is the rabbi of Temple Anshe Amunim, a historic Reform temple in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Originally from the Boston area, she completed her undergraduate education at Brown University with a degree in environmental studies. Between college and rabbinical school, she worked as a legislative assistant at the Religious Action Center, the Union for Reform Judaism's office in Washington. She was ordained in 2015 at the New York campus of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. Rabbi Hirsch is the founding co-chair of RAC Massachusetts, a statewide synagogue-based community organizing project. She was a key leader in the 2020 campaign to pass the Roe Act, safeguarding reproductive rights in Massachusetts, a coalition that we at JCRC were also proud to be part of. And she is a member of the National Council of Jewish Women's Rabbinic Advisory Group. Good evening, Rabbi Hirsch.
Thank you, Jeremy, so much for that introduction. And thank you to everyone for being here this evening. I'm really inspired and encouraged by the number of you who've turned out tonight. I am honored to be here wearing both my RAC Massachusetts and NCJW Rabbis for Repro hats this evening. I should have brought two hats. And I want to be sure to lift up another opportunity to study and gather together. Repro Shabbat will be February 17th to 18th after the turn of the year. And your synagogue could host their own event, just as mine has done in years past, or you can find something to attend in person or online. This week's Torah portion, which we'll study for a moment together now, Vayetze, begins with iconic words from our ancestor, Jacob. Jacob is in the desert. He is on the run. He is not in a very comfortable place. He's using a rock for a pillow. But he falls asleep and he has an amazing dream of angels climbing a ladder to heaven. He wakes up and exclaims, Achen yesh Adonai b'makom chazev anochi lo yadati. God was in this place and I did not know. These are words that inspire me often, looking for God in hidden or unexpected places. And yet in challenging, difficult times, it can be hard to feel this way, that God is in this place. Today, we call out from our place, from our commonwealth, from our home. We ask, what can we, as residents of Massachusetts, do to help to safeguard and protect reproductive rights, access, and justice? And we call out from our place from this difficult moment in time. We can't believe that this is the state of reproductive rights, access, and justice in our country today, even as we are more safe and secure in Massachusetts, thanks to the important work of advocates like all of you. But maybe, just maybe, from a narrow place, a difficult place, a place where we are struggling to feel God's presence, we can emerge into a more inclusive and equitable future. Reproductive justice, which is often used in our common conversation about this topic, actually has a particular meaning that can lead us toward this better future. Whenever I teach about reproductive justice, it is my first priority to honor and lift up the Black women who created this expansive and inclusive paradigm. And the number one resource that I recommend to you to educate yourself about this framework is this book by Loretta Ross, one of the early leaders of this movement, and Ricky Solinger. The reproductive justice framework establishes 3 essential rights: the right to have children, the right to not have children, and the right to raise those children in secure and safe environments. And I've come to believe it's essential to study our first book of Torah, our formative stories in Genesis, through this reproductive justice lens. This week in our Torah portion, after Jacob's dream, we also lift up the stories of 4 mothers, 4 of them, 4 people who bear children. These are 4 ancient women, and yet their stories and individual journeys are as relatable as if they happened in recent years and decades. Their stories are our stories and the stories of our mothers, grandmothers, sisters, and friends. This week, we share the stories of Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah, the 2 wives and the 2 slave wives or concubines of our patriarch Jacob. Rachel, beloved by Jacob, is barren. She struggles and expresses her frustration about her infertility. Leah is in a loveless relationship with Jacob, yet she conceives children easily. Bilhah and Zilpah, the handmaidens, the slaves, are given to Jacob without expressing any will or agency, and their pregnancies and children serve the legacies of others. Each of these women expand our understanding of reproductive rights, exemplifying the reproductive justice framework, a more nuanced and inclusive approach. Rachel cries out to us, "Let me have children, otherwise I am a dead woman." We feel her pain and we hear her desire to bear children. Leah's story is more complicated and less clear. She conceives easily, bearing many of the children who become the progenitors of the 12 tribes, establishing the people of Israel. She is both elevated and diminished by childbirth. Bilhah and Zilpah, who were given to Jacob against their will as slaves, are regarded as mothers of tribes of Israel, but not often given the merit they deserve, certainly not in equal stature to Rachel or Leah. As Ross and Solinger teach us, reproductive justice has lofty goals requiring the reconstruction of all unjust institutions and practices that affect reproductive decision-making. The needs and voices of poor women, disabled women, women of color, immigrant women, and other vulnerable individuals must be at the center of debates about reproduction. There's perhaps a painful and important history for us to struggle with about diminishing these voices. Like Jacob, whose name is changed to Yisrael, Israel, all of us are strugglers and wrestlers. So in so many ways, I think that we can view this difficult moment as an opportunity. Keeping abortion legal has long been a crucial priority for all of us. For the reform movement advocates and congregations I represent as the co-chair of RAC Massachusetts, for Rabbis for Roe and the National Council of Jewish Women, for all of our sponsoring organizations tonight, and for all of you. With a reproductive justice mindset, we can honor and elevate the prayers of biblical women from so many of our matriarchs who sought divine intervention to enable them to bear children. I'm particularly inspired by the prayer of another of our ancestors seeking to have a child in a safe way. Tamar, we'll read her story in just a few weeks. We pray with Tamar, may it be your will, eternal my God, that I will not go out from this house empty. We pray that in this place, we may find a way to say, God was in this place, and I did not leave empty. I left full. God was in this place, and I found a way to know it. May our Torah, our sacred story, inspire us to action tonight and always.
Good evening, everyone. Hard to follow that, Liz. Thank you so much. That was true to the heart. Good evening, everyone. So nice to see so many friendly faces on the screen. My name is Lara Crawford. I go by pronouns she, her, and hers, and I am the Massachusetts State Policy Advocate, SPA. On behalf of the Massachusetts Small But Mighty Group across the Commonwealth, it is my honor and privilege to welcome Sheila Katz. Sheila is the CEO and naturally born leader of the National Council of Jewish Women. We are a 129-year-old feminist civil rights organization pushing the United States towards a more equitable future. During Sheila's time as CEO, NCJW has more than doubled its number of advocates working to advance the rights of women, children, and families through 50 local sections, a very vibrant state policy advocacy network, and several action teams. Under Sheila's leadership, NCJW has responded to threats to reproductive freedom, voting rights, childcare access, equal pay, and other civil rights issues of our times. Oh, sorry. Sheila was educated at Ithaca College and began her career as an elementary school teacher with Teach for America. She pivoted to directing Jewish student life in Chapel Hill and then in Washington, D.C., where for 11 years, she directed a student engagement and leadership portfolio at Hillel International, as well as also founding many programs to expand student participation in Jewish and civic life, including Ask Big Questions and Mitzvot. Named as one of the top 10 faith influencers by Religion News Services and one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world by Jerusalem Post, Sheila is taking her Jewish values and leading a grassroots network of 200,000 plus passionate and vocal people to improve the lives of women and children and families. Welcome to Massachusetts, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Lara. Thank you, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. Just really, whenever Jeremy asks to do anything, I'm going to say yes. So honored to be with you and Rabbi Liz. I hope we could take this show on the road because that was just really beautiful. Thanks for your framing and reminding us why this is Jewish and why we're coming together. I also just want to give a quick shout out. I see one of our board members, Linda Noonan from Massachusetts, is on the call. And obviously I give warm welcome from our president, Dana Gershon, who used to live in Massachusetts, but has fond memories with many of you and sends her love tonight. I'm going to speak for a little bit about kind of the state of play of what's going on. I know you're going to get some specific instructions from folks after me about what you in Massachusetts can do, but I really just want to start with gratitude for you showing up tonight because abortion has been politicized and women's bodies have been politicized for so long that sometimes people don't show up to these conversations. And so we need more people to even just engage in the conversation of why this is important. And I actually think it's an important first step and a step worth celebrating. So thank you so much for being here. The best way, there's so much to say about how we got here, where we're at and where we're going. But I do just want to name that this is part of a puzzle piece of a lot of other things that are going on right now, where if we can zoom out, we can actually look at a full-on attack that's happening towards women in particular, and an understanding that in the reproductive health space, not all women can get pregnant. That's an incorrect assumption for many reasons. And B, not only women can get pregnant. And so at National Council of Jewish Women, we try to be as inclusive as we can about trans men and anybody whose bodies are impacted in this moment, while also zooming out and understanding that why so much of this is at place is because of a systemic reason why people want to take away women's rights in particular, and go back into a particular era. And so as we're navigating abortion rights and abortion bans, we have to put the piece of the puzzle in place that we also don't have paid family leave. We don't have equal pay yet. 50% of our country doesn't have childcare access, not affordable childcare access. 50% of our country is a childcare desert with no access to childcare. We still are at the rate of 20% of women experiencing sexual assault every single year, a statistic that hasn't changed in over 50 years. And there's so much at play here, and understanding what it means for our bodies to be on the line in this moment. And of course, I mentioned we don't have paid family leave, but in our country, 25% of women and 25% of people who give birth have to go back to work within 10 days of having a baby. So this is really, really complicated. And I wanted to start by sharing some of that framework because there are a lot of myths about abortion, who has abortion and why they have abortion. And in order to engage in this, we have to first kind of confront some of those myths and understand why they exist. A lot of people talk about like the myth of the pregnant teen. And the myth of the pregnant teen is if she mysteriously must have gotten pregnant on her own, right? Like that's not how pregnancy works. But in reality, the average person who has an abortion in our country is a mom who is married, who already has 2 kids. And the reason it's important to hold on to that and to understand that is because the average person seeking to have an abortion is seeking to have an abortion because they can't afford a child. And when you put that in perspective of all of the lack of policies we have for families, for women, for pay, for a variety of things, you have to understand that when you're talking about this as an economic issue, you understand that there's dignity at play for the person who is pregnant. There is dignity at play into trying to build a life for the children that they already have. And so, so it's important to understand the economic justice side of things. And of course, there's a racial justice layer. This is disproportionately impacting low-income women of color. Rabbi Liz, you did such an incredible job of giving a reproductive justice framework. And I would only add to it that a lot of people would say, why would I bring a child into this country if they're going to get shot in school, if they're going to get shot by the police? The leading cause of death right now in the United States for children are guns, gun violence, unlike any other country in the world. And so I don't mean to depress you with all of this, but I do think we have to understand how to slowly build these puzzle pieces together and give rights back to people to decide if, when, and how to start or continue their family. At the end of the day, that has to be the decision for the person who's able to have the child. The other thing I like to say about some of the myths of abortion, in addition to who has it and who's most likely to have it, is that obviously abortion impacts those who wish to terminate pregnancy. And that's very important. And I think it doesn't get talked about enough, to be honest. People should be able to have an abortion for any reason. That's our perspective. And abortion bans also impact people who want to get pregnant. Right now in Texas, if you have a miscarriage and an unviable fetus and you don't naturally miscarry the full fetus, you go to a hospital to have a D&C procedure. In Texas, when you go to do that, they say, sorry, because this isn't actually about the life of a fetus. If it were, you would be able to have a D&C procedure. This is about controlling people's bodies and controlling and forcing women of color in particular into poverty and keeping them into poverty and keeping them controlled in these kinds of ways. So people seeking pregnancy who have a miscarriage or an unviable fetus can't currently get a D&C procedure unless they come back in a state of septic shock, in their system, or they show that they're about to die. And even when that happens, they have to go up through the hospital system to get approval in order for doctors to provide a D&C procedure, which is medically constituted as an abortion. Same goes for ectopic pregnancies right now. Understanding that because of Roe v. Wade in this country, and only because of Roe v. Wade in this country, we are able to have in vitro fertilization, IVF. We now understand that in most countries that have banned abortion, the things that are next are IVF and egg freezing, both because of fetal tissue and because of classification of embryos and the fetus's life. So if you classify a fetus as a life, you have a lot to consider about whether you can do IVF, whether you can freeze eggs. And I'll just share, this is probably one of the most unexpected things we navigated. You can imagine we've been, flooded with questions of individuals working at Jewish organizations, of rabbis, of CEOs, of a lot of people in the Jewish community. The number one question National Council of Jewish Women got after Roe was overturned was not anything I expected. It was from people who have frozen their eggs all around the country, who asked if they needed to move their frozen eggs out of the states that they're currently in to another state in where abortion is protected. Ooh. And so our answer has been not yet, which is a really, really hard answer to say. And we are working really closely with the Jewish Fertility Foundation to set up emergency funds and things that we believe might need to be in place in our country to be able to support people who might need to navigate something like that down the line. So all of that said, abortion bans impact so much about our well-being, our livelihood, our futures, disproportionately, again, people and particularly women of color. And it impacts how, if, and when we're able to start a family. And to be honest, we can't be free in this country if we can't make those decisions on our own and for ourselves. And so the other thing that's super important to know as Jews, as Rabbi Liz framed a bit already, is that this is a deeply Jewish issue, first and foremost because we care about the dignity of people involved in this issue, but also because actually Judaism has a perspective on it. And we do not consider life beginning at conception. We don't. And while I want to name, particularly because we know about 30% of all pregnancies lead to miscarriage, we would never imply that that's something that's not challenging or something difficult or traumatic for people to go through if they're seeking to start or continue a family. But in Judaism, a fetus doesn't have the same classification as a human life. And it's important to understand because that's why we prioritize the life of the pregnant person in many ways. And so this is also the greatest religious liberty issue that we've seen in our country in over 50 years. And to put it into perspective, before the Dobbs decision, when Roe was overturned, that morning, the Supreme Court justices who voted to take away our rights prayed with anti-abortion Christian activists that morning, right? We know that they understood this as a religious liberty issue because we filed the brief that named it that way. And it was referenced by Justice Sotomayor when she said, whose religious freedom are we talking about here? And so Jews, Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs all have a different interpretation of when life begins. And so for the Supreme Court to legislate when life begins according to one narrow interpretation of one tradition and force it on all of us is something that we're pushing up against. And so there's a lot of reasons for us to speak up, and you could choose the lane that feels right to you. But I'm here to say that this is an uphill battle, and we will only get there if we get there together, and we will only get there if we take away the stigma of abortion. And the way we do that is by saying the word abortion and by talking about it and making space so that if people have stories, they can feel comfortable sharing it. When I took this job, I wasn't an activist in this issue beforehand. And the more and more I started talking about abortion, the more and more people started telling me about their abortion stories. The more and more people who started telling me about miscarriages they may have had or their reproductive journeys overall, and the complexities of decisions people have to make, whether that be about them desperately wanting to get pregnant and struggling, or really not wanting to be pregnant and navigating that. And so I really want to invite all of you, first and foremost, as you think of next steps, to try on this week, saying the word abortion to someone. not in a whisper, but fully just in a conversation. And one of the most fascinating things about our rights being taken away right now is that for an entire generation, it has been assumed as a right, which makes us really fruitful for multi-generational conversations and makes us really fruitful for people to be able to engage stories across age and background on topics we don't normally sit and talk about, right? So whether you're comfortable asking if you have your mom or your grandma or your daughter or your granddaughter or whomever in your family is around about their relationship with reproductive health and their reproductive journeys, there's so many important conversations you could be having to understand how this issue impacts people you love. And so we have a conversation guide that you could use if you're interested with friends and family. And if you're not comfortable with your family, start with people you want to talk about this with. When I did this conversation with my friends, I learned that 3 of them have had what's considered a medical abortion, and they didn't even realize it because they didn't consider D&C procedures and abortion and didn't see how their reproductive journeys were connected to these issues and these bans. So having these conversations and saying out loud some of the things we haven't said is actually really critical to change making. And as Rabbi Liz said, Repro Shabbat is February 17th to 18th. We're expecting 1,500 communities around the country to engage in teaching and learning about Judaism and abortion. It's times that week because our Torah portion talks about this. And we have found that a lot of people don't know that our Torah portions talk about this. And we want to make sure that from the Bima, people are educating about what Judaism has to say about the life and well-being of the pregnant person, that they understand abortion is healthcare in Jewish tradition and in Jewish values, and that we remind ourselves that the majority of Jews agree on this issue. It's so nice. We don't agree on anything, but most of us agree on this issue. And after the Dobbs decision, when Roe was overturned, the Reform, Reconstructionist, conservative movement and the OU all took out statements saying, the Orthodox Union, that this is a violation of our religious liberty. This is an agreed upon issue in the Jewish community that we pretend is not an agreed upon issue in the Jewish community. And so we have to actually speak in a unified voice, saying that it's okay to talk about this, it's okay to fight about this. And what I can tell you in our organizing is it's taken a while to get here. When we launched Rabbis for Repro, which now is 2,100 rabbis across denomination, please make sure your rabbi is signed up. We thought about having it called Rabbis for Abortion Access. And when we launched it, rabbis weren't ready to say the word abortion. And so we met people where they were, and nice R&R, Rabbis for Repro, and started people where they were at to move along on this journey. But what we learned is a lot of people are starting so far behind because we have all had a lot of these untruths and myths seeped into us over time that we have to unlearn. And because we don't often talk about sex, and because we don't often talk about women, because we don't talk about our bodies in this way, the concept of abortion has been allowed to become even more taboo than it actually is. And in Judaism, abortion is permitted and sometimes required when the life and well-being of the pregnant person is at risk. And we have the opportunity, and you, Massachusetts, in the wonderful state that you have, with the great laws that you have the ability to actually transform the conversation, because there is an incorrect narrative that religion and abortion don't go together. And the only way we can fix that is with a different narrative on religion and abortion, and a loud narrative on religion and abortion, and a welcoming narrative on religion and abortion. And that doesn't mean we are telling everyone you must have an abortion. That's not how this works. We're telling everyone that you must have the right to make the medical decisions you feel necessary for your own body, to have the full dignity that you deserve, and to have the life and well-being that we should be able to have. And so I hope you'll get involved. I hope you'll speak out loud on this issue. I hope you'll, say the word abortion from the Bima. Consider sharing your own story or trying on sharing your story with loved ones, and understand, everyone here, as you probably already know, that this is such a deeply personal topic that to one person, abortion might be something that is incredibly freeing as part of their journey. And for somebody else, it might be something that brings up a lot of pain from a difficult point in their life. And it is not for me or for you or for anyone to tell anybody what this experience should be like, but it is for us to advocate to be able to have access to abortion so that everybody can decide if, when, and how to continue or to start a family on their own terms. So I think I'm gonna pause there. Thank everybody for having me here tonight. And I'm happy, of course, if there are questions in the chat to figure out here or afterwards how to get back to you with them. But this is hard work. And if the Jewish communal landscape is any indication of where we are, what I can say is we've come a long way already. We've come a long way already. There are signs outside of synagogues saying, you know, reproductive justice is a Jewish value. We've come a long way. And we're also not nearly far enough along of where we need to be leading in this space. And I'll close with the fact that whenever we're doing organizing, we have to center our work on the people who are most impacted. And in this case, it's usually not people within our own synagogues all the time. And so in your communities, you have reproductive justice leaders, you have Black women who were left out of the first fight for abortion access a long time ago. And I think it's really important as you're engaging this to lift up both Jews of color in your community and to lift up the people who have been doing this work for decades and decades and decades. And if you need help finding who those people are, we will find them for you. National Council of Jewish Women, when we were engaging and we anticipated Roe getting overturned, asked our reproductive justice partners how we could be most helpful. And we heard two things loud and clear. One is fundraise money for abortion clinics, of which we have almost raised $1 million that are going directly to help people access abortion services in this country. It's a pass-through gift, none of which has stayed with us. And I'll put the link in the chat in case you'd like to donate to the Jews for Abortion Access Fund, which is a collective communal gift from the Jewish community to abortion funds to help people cross state lines to get abortions, help them get people who can help them navigate their path to get access to an abortion, and can help them fund the actual abortion. And we're hoping to get to $1 million now that we've gotten this close. And two, they said you can make this a religious argument, and you can make this a religious argument in favor of supporting access to abortion. And so that's what we heard loud and clear. That's what I'm passing to you. And we're excited to be in partnership with your wonderful community.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for sharing those really inspiring and impactful remarks, and for joining us tonight. My name is Melissa Krause-Augenbraun. I'm here for ADL New England, and I am now honored to introduce Claire T. Looney, who serves as the Director of Government Affairs for Reproductive Equity Now. Claire joined Reproductive Equity Now in August 2021, after nearly 7 years of public service experience at both the state and federal levels. Claire most recently served as Regional Director for Senator Ed Markey for the 3rd, 5th, and 6th congressional districts, and previously worked as legislative aide to State Representative Christine Barber for 2 legislative sessions. Claire graduated from the University of Denver with a double major in political science and environmental science. Thank you so much, Claire, for joining us tonight to discuss the policy landscape here in Massachusetts.
Thank you, Melissa. Hi, everyone. Good evening. As Melissa said, my name is Claire T. Looney. I am the Director of Government Affairs at Reproductive Equity Now, where our mission as an organization is to make equitable access to the full range of reproductive health care a reality for each and every person. Thank you so much to everyone, all of the co-sponsors of tonight's event, for the invitation to join this evening to talk a little bit about the reproductive equity policy landscape here in Massachusetts. It's been 5 months since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and with it, nearly 50 years of federal constitutional protections for abortion. And since then, there has been a monumental public health, economic, racial justice, and human rights crisis that's unfolded in our country. Today, abortion care is either completely banned or severely restricted in at least 18 states across the country, and 8 others have bans that are currently blocked by the courts. Last month, in the 100 days since Roe was overturned, we saw a report from the Guttmacher Institute showing that 66 clinics across 15 states, 66 abortion clinics across 15 states have been forced to stop offering abortion, deepening what we know are already existing inequities in access to that care across our country. These bans mean that people are forced to travel to access the care that they need if they can afford it. And care has been and will continue to be put further and further out of reach, especially for Black, Brown, immigrant, young, LGBTQ+, and low-income people. Thanks to the advocacy of many of the folks here in this room, the Roe Act that was passed by the legislature in 2020 meant that abortion would remain legal in Massachusetts, regardless of the Dobbs decision. But we need to be very clear, legality, while it was an incredibly important foundation, would not and does not make us immune from this crisis that we're facing nationally. The cascading impact of abortion bans in other states is coming and really has already come to Massachusetts. We know that providers are seeing patients and have been seeing patients from Texas since SB 8 came down last year, and now from many other hostile states, because we're seeing people travel for abortion care wherever they can get a cheap and direct flight. We know they'll travel to family and friends, and they'll travel to where they feel safe. And so we need to make sure that Massachusetts is the place they know that they can come to access safe, legal, and compassionate abortion care. And while abortion remains legal in Massachusetts, regardless of Dobbs, we know that access to care has not been guaranteed, which is why in Massachusetts, legislative leaders and advocates alike knew we had an obligation to take action as we saw the anticipated decision in Dobbs coming. With Reproductive Equity Now, with our partners at the ACLU of Massachusetts and Planned Parenthood of Massachusetts, we worked to think beyond Roe v. Wade and introduce a policy agenda to expand access to abortion in the Commonwealth because, and really I think that the election results we saw across the country just 3 weeks ago confirm this, a big fight for abortion rights is happening at the state level. This is a state-by-state battle and a grassroots fight for abortion access. We created a comprehensive game plan and an agenda to protect reproductive health care from different angles, because even in our Commonwealth, we know that there are obstacles to care that still remain, including burdened providers, exorbitant costs to access care, and complex insurance coverage. So the recommendations in our agenda included ideas to improve access, to make sure that every person, regardless of income, of insurance coverage, of age or location, can access care when they need it. We also explored ways to protect and insulate our providers and our helpers from these harmful consequences for providing care that's legal here in Massachusetts. And thirdly, we recommended deploying both education and research efforts to make sure that we're understanding the scope of the impact of the Dobbs decision here on Massachusetts and making sure that people understand not only the status of care in our state, but also how to navigate it and how to avoid dangerous crisis pregnancy centers, which outnumber legitimate healthcare clinics, even in Massachusetts, by 3 to 1. So in July, our state legislature really made history by passing an extraordinarily comprehensive bill in response to Dobbs that makes abortion care more affordable and accessible by mandating insurance coverage and eliminating any cost sharing for consumers. by introducing medication abortion at campus health centers of public colleges and universities. It takes steps to ensure that no person is forced to travel or leave our state to obtain an abortion at any point in their pregnancy. And it includes best in the nation protections for providers and helpers and anyone who aids people in seeking abortion care and gender affirming care from the impacts of harmful out-of-state litigation. It also takes steps to expand access to emergency contraception by establishing a statewide standing order for both over-the-counter and prescription emergency contraception, which will allow individuals to access no-cost insurance coverage for the EC that's right for them at the pharmacy counter without having to get a prescription. And the legislation expands an address confidentiality program for abortion providers and for providers of gender affirming care to ensure they don't have to face threats of harassment or violence at home. Budgets are also a statement of our values. And in addition to this extraordinary healthcare law that the legislature passed this summer, they invested nearly $20 million in reproductive healthcare access, as well as in our providers and our clinics and in abortion funds, which marks the first time in our state's history that funding has been allocated directly in this way to fund abortion care. Our Commonwealth continues to be a beacon for abortion care and a model for states across the country. But of course, our work does not end here. Our name, Reproductive Equity Now, reflects the urgency that we feel when it comes to demanding and protecting and expanding reproductive healthcare access for everyone. Fighting for equity really asks us to examine and fight not just for equal access to care, but to make sure to give people what they need to access care without delays and without financial burden. Our charge as an organization is to make sure that every person, regardless of their race, their zip code, or how much money is in their bank account, has equitable access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care. So as we look to the upcoming new legislative session and opportunities to partner with a new gubernatorial administration as well, we are looking forward to focusing our advocacy efforts on expanding access to this full spectrum of reproductive health care. This will include many items that are still on our Beyond Roe agenda, including combating the harms and misinformation and disinformation that is disseminated by crisis pregnancy centers, and making sure that patients in Massachusetts have the tools and information they need to navigate legitimate healthcare. It will include, as I mentioned, deploying educational and research efforts to make sure we understand the scope of the impact of Dobbs in Massachusetts and understand its demands on clinics, on hospitals, and on providers, and are able to use that knowledge to deploy our resources efficiently and effectively. And it will include deploying an equitable lens in improving maternal health outcomes in our state by advancing the recommendations of the Special Commission on Racial Inequities in Maternal Health, including better integrating midwifery care into our maternal health care system and expanding access to different birthing options by mitigating financial and regulatory barriers to establishing birth centers in our state as well. From bill filing to bill co-sponsorship and the beginning of a new legislative calendar, I know that January brings so many opportunities for advocacy, and we hope that many of you will join us as we look to build support for both new and continuing legislative priorities. Our work at Reproductive Equity Now to expand reproductive healthcare is really only possible because of all of your support and your volunteer hours and your investment in our work. Massachusetts has shown such incredibly strong leadership in the months following the fall of Roe, and we really have, we believe, an obligation to continue this leadership and make sure that we're paving the way for true reproductive equity for each and every person here in our Commonwealth and each and every person who seeks care in our Commonwealth. And I'm so glad to be here tonight and really look forward to our continued partnership to do this together. Thank you.
Hello. Sorry, there was trouble with getting unmuted. Thank you, Claire, so much for that comprehensive review of the reproductive landscape in Massachusetts and for the very important work that you're doing. I'm Kathy Kirstein, Resource Chair of Hadassah Northeast. And before we begin the section on our program on recent and future opportunities for local action, I want to ask you, our audience, what actions you may have already taken in this space. So Faye Ruth, can you pull up our poll? Great. Please fill out this poll by selecting as many activities as apply, followed by submitting the submit button. So have you phone banked on abortion ballot questions? Have you sent postcards to voters in low access abortion states? Have you donated money to a local provider or abortion fund? Joined a synagogue-based reproductive justice team? Organized for direct service to abortion providers or patients? Engaged in abortion storytelling, reclaiming our narrative? Or attended an information program on reproductive justice, or attended a reproductive justice rally. So please select anything that applies and press submit. So I think you might have all had a chance to fill that out. So Faye Ruth, can you share the results of our poll? All right, so that's great. So 81% of you have attended an information program or a reproductive rally. You've donated money to a local provider, joined a synagogue reproductive justice team, phone banked, postcarded, organized for direct services to abortion providers or patients. So thank you so much for all the work that you've already done. And now we'll turn it over to David and Beth to see what more specifically might be in the future.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is David Albright. I am the Legislative Director at the Jewish Alliance for Law and Social Action. And a big part of what JALSA has been working on this fall is coordinating across the country to have volunteers in Massachusetts work on the 5 abortion ballot questions that were on the ballot this year. And we all know that they were all successful. In California, Vermont, and Michigan, our right to abortion was enshrined in the Constitution. And in Kansas and Kentucky, efforts to make abortion not constitutionally available were not successful. We're joined tonight by Beth Kuhn, who lives in Kentucky. She's an NCJW member from Kentucky, and she's going to talk a little bit about the ballot initiative in Kentucky and what happened.
Great. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I just thought in my 5 minutes, I would spend a little bit of time talking about, I guess, the range of commonwealths that we have in America today. So we've had a great time listening to Massachusetts, which is at the full rights end of the spectrum. Meanwhile, in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, You cannot right now have an abortion for any reason. We have a total ban with no exceptions. And so that is the bad news. The good news is that, as David mentioned, with support from a lot of organizations and a very diverse, robust coalition called Protect Kentucky Access, we did manage to successfully overcome an attempt to put a constitutional ban into effect in Kentucky. And what I wanted to say just in this room, in this virtual room, about the National Council on Jewish Women Committee that I had the privilege of chairing, and the role of the Jewish organizations in particular. The coalition that was active in Kentucky was very diverse, and we were really welcome as a key player in that coalition. And I think what was really worked well, and I think in any kind of future organizing, regardless of what state or commonwealth we might be in, and really regardless of what religious faith we're in, and in our role as Jews too, is the multi-generational dimension of the fight that we fought in Kentucky. We had a lot of women in our NCJW committee who had been at this since the 60s before Roe, and bless their hearts, as we say in Kentucky, they were back at it again. So they had fought the fight before, and they were back at the table, inspiring the younger generation of women that had joined the Protect Kentucky Access Coalition. So we were multi-generational. And the thing that I think was particularly interesting is that, no shock to anyone in this room, people in our states right now, be it Kentucky or Massachusetts, they don't so much trust their politicians. The two people they trust are their faith leaders and their physicians. And one of the things that we found that our Jewish folks and our partners really have going for us in this fight was we were very plugged in and involved in the healthcare realm and also on the faith conversation. And so I'm really encouraged and inspired. We have a lot of work that lies ahead in Kentucky and in all over the country, but we really activated the healthcare messaging around and got so many of our doctors and nurses and other healthcare leaders from the Jewish community to step up and step out and get involved. And we made the faith-based argument that Sheila and others tonight have really called out about how and why the Jewish perspective on abortion needs to be called out. And so those two pillars of faith and healthcare really, I think, helped lead the charge in Kentucky and kept us really engaged and involved and ultimately successful there. The one thing I would say, I think that's very interesting as I turn it back over to you, David, and back into the rest of the conversation tonight, I think it's tricky. And I noticed that what Sheila talked about, I think on the one hand, and certainly in commonwealths and states like Massachusetts, where we have abortion protections, it's absolutely true that people in our Jewish congregations are not as impacted by restrictions as people in the low-income community, people of color, and we have to step out and fight hard for equity. I think sometimes though, and I saw this in Kentucky, we go a little bit too far and get a little bit too complacent about, we have a lot of risk in our own congregations in places like Kentucky where there is a total ban, because you might have resources, have access to healthcare, but if you have an ectopic pregnancy in a part of Kentucky where you can't get access to care and there's a total abortion ban, it doesn't matter how well connected or well resourced you are. And so I think the urgency of this fight in the southern states and the states with a total ban across all of our communities is really still there. And I bring that back to all of us as we continue to think about what's next and the need for advocacy and engagement nationwide in the Jewish community and in all our communities. So I appreciate the chance to talk about our experience and look forward to the work that lies ahead, which is quite a bit. And happy to be contacted or share more strategies and information beyond the 5 minutes that I had tonight.
All right, thank you so much, Beth. It was great working with you. Now we're going to hear from Diane Yazger, who is a reproductive justice team leader at Temple Isaiah in Lexington.
Hi, everyone. Well, I have to say, I am so impressed with tonight and looking at the attendees and the speeches that people are giving. And another piece of it is I'm so glad to see so many males on this call as well, because this is not a woman's problem. This is an issue for all of us. So I'm delighted to see that. My road, it's kind of interesting because I never really signed up for it. I was very distraught about the elections and where they were going, and basically asked my synagogue, are we doing anything about this? Can we do anything about this? And I got an answer from our VP of Tikkun Olam. Oh, I was looking for somebody to head this up for us. We need a team leader. And I said, oh, what does that mean? Because we really didn't have anything in the way of reproductive justice, but people were starting to ask for it. And so I signed up to facilitate actions and whatever we were going to do. And very, very quickly, over 20 women signed up to work together to do something. And I say to do something because when we started, we really didn't know what to do. We didn't know where we should put our energies, where we could put our energies. We had a lot of questions. We were very fortunate that we have a number of obstetricians who signed up to join us, one of whom had gotten herself licensed in Kansas to perform abortions, to help there, because she had learned that a clinic in Kansas had become the largest serving clinic for the Great Plains states. And from that knowledge, we all said, what can we do to help there? And we started making care packages to send to Kansas. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate at this point. They told her after a while that they had enough staff. They didn't need her to come out. Good news, she didn't have to come out and leave her practice here. By the same token, is that because so many people were no longer able to practice in their home states, and so they moved to a place where they could practice. So that we don't know. From there, we have also been able to make inroads with one of our local clinics that is in need of help, because contrary to what a number of people initially thought, there are a number of people coming in from other states to Massachusetts for abortions. I had heard from many people saying, oh, nobody's going to come to Massachusetts. We're too far away. We're in the cold, so on and so forth. There's a lot of activity. We know of people coming in from Georgia, coming in from Rhode Island, coming in from many places. And this clinic is overburdened at this point and looking for help. So we are working to fill the void to provide care packages for the women, as well as items that are needed by the staff and the providers. It's a big issue, and we're still struggling with understanding how else can we help. One of the things that we found is that it's part of this is working together, just as we're all here tonight together on a smaller level, on a more local level, working together, has a much stronger ring, a much more vibrant ring, much more collaboration in working together to achieve any of the things that we're trying to do. But we keep asking for what else can we do? So we look to all of you. We look to JCRC. We look to National Council of Jewish Women. We look to RAC. We look to all of you to help us focus our efforts where it's most needed, where we can do the most good.
Thanks so much, Diane. It's so wonderful to be with all of you tonight. My name is Rachel Lewis. I'm the Director of Synagogue Organizing for the JCRC. And it's just, yeah, it's really such a privilege to be with so many people doing so many kinds of good work. And there is so much more work to do that we can do together, that you can do in synagogue groups, that you can do individually. And we really want tonight to be a moment where we can digest all of this information, all of these different opportunities, and start to chart some path forward together and in groups that make sense. And we know from everything that Sheila and Claire and others have said that the landscape around us is always evolving, both in Massachusetts and all over the country. And with the evolving landscape, the opportunities for engagement and support are also evolving. And it's so critical that we sustain our engagement, that we are able to really take the time that we need to and learn what we need to learn and listen to who we need to listen to in order to find the right pathways at the right time. This is not a sprint. It is certainly a long marathon. I am certainly learning this. I know we all are in our own ways, and we can learn so much from leaders in the reproductive justice and reproductive rights work that have been in this for so long and have so much to teach us. And I remember this quote that I learned on, a lot of us, as we saw on the polls, we saw lots of things from that really great poll that people are doing all kinds of things, including going to lots of webinars. I remember going to a webinar with Reverend Kenyatta Chinwe, a leader, an amazing faith leader in the South for an organization called Sister Song. And Reverend Kenyatta said, we have to stay in the work for the time that it takes. So it's going to take time to figure out many of these different pieces, whether that's based on legislative cycles and them taking the time that it takes, whether that's based on forming the kinds of relationships both with providers in Massachusetts and with abortion rights groups and abortion access and reproductive justice groups elsewhere in the country. All of these things are going to take time. And we are here for it, and we want to be able, all of us as all of the different Jewish organizations who have put this together, want to help be pathways for all of us to be able to do different parts of that work that speak to us and that speak to teams and groups that we are going to form along the way. So we want to lay out what some of those possibilities are, so that the relevant organizations that are leading the way on those pieces can follow up with you. And I love it if you can put the sign up link survey in the chat so that people can get a chance to see the different options. So the goal is for everybody here to really commit to some kind of action, some kind of area of interest, so that we are able to follow up and that we are able to continue to walk this road together, cautiously following the leaders that we need to follow. And so you should open up that form and fill it out. We'll follow up. The options for engagement are many. We've heard about the state policy advocacy that we're going to need to be involved in down the line through the Beyond Roe Coalition. We'll see all of the things that come up through them. We know that there will be some federal policy advocacy to do over time, different legislative efforts and policy efforts that are going to come up. We also really want to help engage people around direct support of people who are seeking abortion care. And as Diane said, Temple Isaiah is involved in some post-abortion care package packing, and we want to invite other folks who are interested in putting a drive together. This is a great effort for a team, for a synagogue team, or any kind of group to take on. We also know that a particular need, in addition to the amazing work that NCJW is doing around the Jewish Fund for Abortion Access, we do know that a particular need of local providers is specifically around Uber and Lyft gift cards right now. We've been in touch at JCRC with some of the providers, and we know that transportation support is a really big issue right now, and it takes some coordination. And so we want to just really put in a plug for people to get in touch about being able to acquire and send some Uber and Lyft gift cards so that people seeking abortion care are able to access it. And then we also we've talked a lot about ways that we can get stories out, and abortion storytelling and reproductive autonomy story sharing. And for the groups on this call that have helped to put this together, that are involved in that, you should definitely sign up if you want to share any of your story, or if you know of others who might be interested in that. And it's really important to keep educating ourselves. This has been an amazing opportunity to learn so much about the national landscape, about the local landscape in Massachusetts, to hear about what other leaders in our community are doing. And we need to continue to educate ourselves. We need to educate ourselves about how we talk about abortion. Sheila has talked about that really beautifully, and there's more opportunities to really learn about messaging and knowing how to talk about this the right way so that we can engage more people and not get trapped. And also there are opportunities to really learn from workshops that connect abortion justice and Jewish values. So we really hope that you sign up for as many of these as you're interested in, that if you're a part of a community that is interested in doing this work as a team, that this work will exponentially have effects. I see several people from teams that are already doing a lot of amazing work on this call. And so this is really a moment to say, I want to do these things. I know that it's going to take the time that it takes. We will follow up with you. The appropriate organization and leaders will follow up with you. And we really want to put a stake in the ground as a Jewish community that we are here for the long run. We are here for the marathon, for abortion access, for reproductive justice, and we're able to do that in a much more impactful way together and with the right tools and education. And now I would love to pass it over to Cindy to close us out with some reflections, but it's great to be together.
Thanks, Rachie. Thanks so much. And thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Cindy Rowe. I'm the Executive Director of JALSA, the Jewish Alliance for Law and Social Action. And by being here with us tonight, you are making the point loud and clear that our work to protect abortion access and abortion providers is critical, and that we will not stop. Our Jewish values tell us that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. We do that by empowering people to make decisions about their own health care. We do it by protecting people's freedom to decide when to grow their families. We do that by opposing attempts to have government officials interfere in the conversations that should happen just between a pregnant person and their doctor. Tonight, we have heard many ways we can work together, both on the state and federal levels, to protect our rights so that we can create a society where we all have the freedom to live healthy, productive lives. So thank you to all of our speakers, to all the co-sponsoring organizations, and to all of you for joining us here on Zoom. Please remember to fill out that Google form before you leave so that we know how you want to take the next step in this fight with the Jewish community to protect access to abortion and dignity for all people. Thank you all so much.
It isn't right for too many falling. They say it's in the name of the greater good. Oh, we lost sight. World is getting colder. What happened to the words for which we once stood? I will stand for you. Would you stand for me? Everybody deserves to be free. I would lend a hand to you. Would you lend a hand?